So as I mentioned, I'm not a biotech VC, and actually I think that that's a feature, not a bug. And the reason that I think so is because I'm going to look at things from a bit of an outsider's perspective, from an investor's perspective, from the perspective of a financial economist trying to understand what the challenges are in starting up a company, particularly in the biotech sector. And in a way, I think that's going to pair very nicely with the kind of challenges you're going to be faced with, because from your perspective, one of the things that you'll need to be able to do is to convince people like me how it is that I'm to be able to recapture a reasonable rate of return on capital. So I'll come to that in a few minutes, but just to be clear that I don't have the kind of biotech VC experience that many other speakers might, so keep that in mind, and feel free to interrupt with questions, comments, or if you disagree on some points that I make, because I'd like us to figure out together what some of the biggest challenges are. Second point of disclosure is that although I'm not a biotech VC, I actually do invest in biotech companies, and I've advised various different biotech VC firms, obviously not on the science, but more on the investment and the business models. And I'll talk a bit about that over the course of the next few minutes. And as a result, I think because my focus is going to be on the financing and business strategy, I'm going to be talking about aspects of biotech VC that may be a little bit different than what you've heard from other speakers. So I'll also share with you my own startup experience and describe some of the challenges that I faced on the financial side. But there are also some biotech VCs that I've talked to that will sort of confirm the kind of challenges that they see in their companies. So that's sort of the disclaimer, and now I'm going to try to describe to you what it is that I'd like to cover over the next half hour or so. And the way that I'm going to do that is by referring you to a very old movie that some of you may have seen called Rashomon. This was a movie that came out in 1950. Produced by Akira Kurosawa. He was the director. And it won all kinds of awards, although from a financial perspective, it was pretty much of a flop. It did not make money in the box office. But oddly enough, it's viewed as one of the greatest films in entire film history. So if you haven't seen it, I would urge you to look for it. It's a really interesting movie. It's about an incident that occurred among 4 or 5 people. A murder, a rape, and what happened afterwards. And the interesting thing about the movie is that each person has a completely different take on the events that occurred. It was the same set of events, but because they were looking at it differently, they actually came up with very different narratives. And so this Rashomon effect is something that's come into popular parlance. And I'd like to use that as a way to start thinking about this whole notion of all you need to know in order to start a biotech company. One of the key aspects is for you to understand all of those different perspectives. So for example, there's the perspective of the scientists and the clinicians. Many of you in the audience, that's your perspective. You're focusing on your research and how it applies and might be commercialized in various different ways. But then there are the entrepreneurs, those of you who will decide that you want to pursue this full-time or in collaboration with others full-time and actually take the ideas from the bench into the clinic. And then there are the investors. Those are the individuals like venture capitalists and their particular investors that are going to put money at work to be able to make these kinds of ideas come to pass. Then we've got the regulators that will tell you, no, 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 you can't do this, you can't do that. And finally, and in my view, the most important of all, you've got the patients. And ultimately, while we can have lots of conversations about these different perspectives, at the back of our minds, I hope that all of us will keep in mind that the bottom line is actually patients. It doesn't mean that that needs to be front and center of what you're doing day to day. Obviously, those of you who are absolutely fascinated by the science, you should focus on the science. But in terms of how we think about starting a biotech company, it's actually very helpful to focus on patients.